Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world, one book at a time. Today, we're looking at Fight Club because it reveals a really critical pattern: how a life defined by consumption can create a vacuum of meaning, a vacuum that can get filled by some radical and pretty dangerous new systems. So, Chuck Palahniuk's 1996 novel, it's just this raw look at a core problem in our modern corporate world. It's about that feeling of alienation, that identity collapse that can happen to someone who feels like they're defined only by their job title and the stuff they own. The book just drops us right into its first system, a world where our narrator's life is basically a catalog of Swedish furniture and calculated corporate risks. He actually says, the dishes in the cabinets were me. I mean, on paper, it's a perfect life, right? But it feels completely and utterly empty. So yeah, this system, where your entire identity is built on what you buy and what you do for a paycheck, it creates this deep, profound crisis. Our protagonist feels totally disconnected, like he's a ghost in his own life. And that feeling? Well, it leads to a total psychological breakdown. And this is where we start to see the cracks in that system. When the default world just fails to provide any real meaning, what happens? The failure manifests as this deep personal crisis. And it all kicks off with something simple, but honestly terrifying: the inability to sleep. And look, this insomnia is way more than just being tired. It's a total disconnection from reality. Everything starts to feel like a distant, out-of-body experience. This feeling of numbness, of being a copy of a copy, it drives him to find some kind of authentic feeling anywhere he can. He starts faking terminal diseases just so he can sit in support groups and find a real human connection. Because it's only there, facing what he thinks is real suffering, that he can finally cry and feel something, anything at all. So here's the crucial insight from the book. When our sense of who we are is built entirely on the mediated ideals of consumer culture and corporate life, some people might seek out meaning through raw, unfiltered, and even destructive experiences, just to feel alive. And right into that void, a counter system begins to emerge from the shadows. Of course, that system is Fight Club. Now, this new system isn't just about random violence. No, it's a structured rebellion. It's got its own rules, its own rituals, its own incentives, and the whole thing is specifically designed to cancel out the values of the corporate world he's trying to escape. And this setup creates a really powerful feedback loop. The secrecy actually builds community. The pain becomes proof of reality. And in this new system, the main incentive is flipped on its head. Self-destruction gets reframed as the only real path to self-improvement. But this is where the whole dynamic shifts. The very thing that promised freedom starts to change. It begins to harden into something new, and something that's not so free after all. Here's a helpful way to picture it. Think of the narrator's alienation as a pressure system with no release valve. The pressure of his empty, consumer-driven life just builds and builds and builds until it finally ruptures into the raw, destructive chaos of Fight Club. It's a release, for sure, but, and this is key, it is not a solution. Because that chaotic release, it doesn't last. The system evolves, it hardens, and it starts to scale up its ambitions, going from personal destruction to full-on societal anarchy. And right here, that crucial feedback loop reveals itself. The rebellion starts to replicate the very structures of control it was created to destroy. The freedom of Fight Club, where the rule is you are not your name, hardens into the rigid dogma of Project Mayhem, where the rule becomes you have no name. Ultimately, Fight Club helps us notice this recurring pattern. It shows us how a desperate search for authenticity can calcify into a rigid ideology, and how a movement that's born from rebellion can become its own inescapable form of control. Looking at it through this systems-level lens really changes how we might interpret movements that promise freedom and meaning, but demand destruction and absolute obedience as the price. It forces us to ask that question: is the cure just another disease? For the full, long-form deep dive into this book and its ideas, follow the link in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.